question set 4. Turning to the facts of question number 1. Question number 1 reads, an attorney represented a defendant in a civil case. The defendant was being sued after allegedly running a red light and striking the plaintiff's vehicle. The defendant testified at trial that the light was green when the defendant drove through it. The defendant's testimony was consistent with the story the defendant had told the attorney in the past. However, the attorney was trained in detecting when someone was getting nervous or lying and did not personally believe the defendant's story. There was no other evidence that the defendant was lying, and the defendant's story was consistent with the story of nearby bystander. The jury found in favor of plaintiff. The call to question asks, is the attorney subject to discipline? So turning to the rule that this question is testing. This question is testing whether or not the attorney is subject to discipline or if they've done anything wrong by allowing their client in a civil case to testify. And more specifically, pursuant to the facts tell us that this attorney really didn't believe his or her client's testimony. But the issue is that this lawyer didn't have any proof that the client was lying, and in fact, the client's story really kind of was consistent with everyone else's. And then the facts go on to tell us that ultimately the client ended up losing. So the overarching issue is whether or not this lawyer is subject to discipline for allowing the client to testify. So this is testing what you must do or what the rules say if you are dealing with false evidence. Well, the rule specifically says is that you cannot offer evidence that you know to be false. And that is really what this question is testing. Here, the facts make it pretty clear that there is no knowledge. There is absolutely no concrete evidence that this lawyer has that his or her client is lying. The lawyer just suspects the client is lying. So because of that, and there is no knowledge, the lawyer hasn't done anything wrong. So revisiting the call to question here, it says, is the attorney subject to discipline? So we'll be looking for an answer choice that says no, because the lawyer doesn't know whether or not the evidence that they are offering or did offer was false or not. So turning to answer choice A. A says yes, because the attorney called the defendant as a witness, even though the attorney thought the defendant was lying. A is incorrect because it misses the knowledge requirement that the rule requires. Here the rule says you cannot offer evidence that you know is false. Here again, the lawyer doesn't know whether or not this testimony is false. B says yes, because the attorney failed to take reasonable remedial action after he detected that the defendant was lying in court. Again, B is missing the point like A is. We don't have knowledge as to whether or not this client, the witness, is in fact lying. So this lawyer is not required to take any reasonable remedial action. Answer choice C says no, because the jury apparently disbelieved the client's or the defendant's testimony. So here, C is wrong, but not only is it wrong because it misses the rule. Again, it really doesn't articulate that the lawyer hasn't done anything wrong here, but it is also a classic wrong answer on the MPRE. I like to think of it as like a no harm, no foul, like answer choice. And by that I mean it doesn't matter whether or not something bad happened or resulted from a rule violation. If a lawyer violated the rules, then they violated the rules. It's as simple as that. You're going to find on the MPRE that they often give you answer choices that illustrate that there was a rule violation, but nothing bad happened thereafter. So it's just not a big deal. But you can always cross those answers off as being incorrect because something bad doesn't have to happen in order for a lawyer to get in trouble. The only thing that matters under these rules is whether or not the lawyer violated them. So C is wrong. Turning to answer choice D, it says no because the attorney did not know of its falsity. So D is correct here, and it's correct because it totally illustrates what we had just discussed, that there is a knowledge requirement here and that this lawyer doesn't have any knowledge as to whether or not what his or her client just testified to was false. Turning to question number 2. Here the facts read, one of the attorney's regular clients, who was also a longtime personal friend of the attorney, was traveling to another country to compete in a competitive sport. Prior to leaving the country, the client paid the attorney a retainer of $100,000 so that the attorney could pay the client's insurance bills when they became due. The insurance bills ended up totaling only $80,000. The attorney needed to pay off a personal debt of his own in a short period of time and borrowed $10,000 from the client's trust account. The attorney did not ask the client's permission to do so, since the client was out of the country. However, the attorney thought that the client would approve. A week later, the attorney settled a large case of his own and deposited $10,000 back into the client trust account. Further, the attorney paid 8% interest on the $10,000 and deposited the interest in the trust account as well. 8% is higher than the standard interest rate, so in the end, the client benefited from this transaction. When the client returned from the trip, the attorney told the client what he had done, and the client approved of the conduct. Is the attorney subject to discipline? So what is this rule testing? What rule is this question testing? And here, this is testing whether or not, as a lawyer, we can borrow or use or commingle clients' monies or property. And the answer to that is no. The rules make it very clear here that when you take money from a client, it should be kept in a trust account. Whether or not it's pooled or separate just depends upon the amount of money in which you are handling for the client. But nonetheless, it's put in a trust account, and you have to be sure that you keep your own money and property separate from the client's. You're not allowed to borrow it, steal it, or commingle it. And here, based on these facts, the attorney unfortunately did borrow it, and borrowed it without getting permission from the client. If a lawyer is going to be borrowing money from a client, they should treat it like a business transaction and follow those rules associated with that. Here, this lawyer just basically took it upon himself and basically assumed that this would be okay because the client didn't need the money and basically paid out interest on it so that the client could benefit from it. And that is great and all, except it still violates the rule. A lawyer is not allowed to borrow, steal, or commingle a client's monies. That is the problem here. So turning to the call to question, it says, is the attorney subject to discipline? We would be looking for an answer choice that illustrates a yes response because the lawyer used the client's money for his own personal bill, right? This lawyer took the money to pay off his own personal debt. So let's assess the answer choices. A says no, so long as the attorney's conduct did not amount to commingling of funds. A is incorrect because even if you don't want to call this commingling, which arguably it may be. Commingling is this idea where you have combined what is your client's money and what is your money together. So even if this is not specifically commingling, we can't get around the fact that the lawyer borrowed the client's money and took it without consent. A is missing that, so A is incorrect. B says no because the attorney reasonably believed at the time she withdrew the money that the client would not object, given their long-standing personal friendship. B is wrong. It doesn't matter what you think. If you think your client's okay with it or not, it still doesn't get around the rule violation that you took your client's money here. C says no because the client was fully informed of the attorney's actions and consented to the actions, thereby retroactively ratifying the attorney's conduct. C is one of those classics, like no harm, no foul like responses. First of all, there's no rule that illustrates that a client can retroactively consent to something like this. But even if that type of rule existed, it still doesn't change the fact that the lawyer took the client's money without consent. So C is just wrong. And D says yes, because the attorney used the client's funds for a personal purpose. And this is accurate. This embodies basically everything that we just discussed. So D is the correct answer. Turning to question 3. It reads, the following advertisement appeared in an online advertisement in a state in which both attorneys are members of the bar. Attorney Alan Abel, J.D., Attorney Betty Buttons, J.D., Attorneys at Law, A, B, C, D, E Street, State 99999, their telephone number, and then we have never lost a trial. Both attorneys are new and have never tried a case. Are the attorneys subject to discipline? So the rule that this question is testing is all about advertisements, specifically, like if an attorney can advertise and how. We know that lawyers can advertise, but we also know that when they make communications on behalf of themselves, their firm, and their services, everything that they say has to be truthful and not misleading. So here, based upon the facts, we know that everything this advertisement is saying is truthful. It looks like they are both lawyers. I'm assuming that this is their accurate, street and address. And it's also true that they've never lost a trial. However, the rule says that everything we state in our advertisements have to be truthful and not misleading. Here, this whole quoted language of "we have never lost a trial" is misleading. While it might technically be accurate because they've never tried a case, it's not illustrating that specific point. It doesn't tell the public that these attorneys have never tried a case and therefore that's why they've never lost a case. So this is not okay. This is misleading. So revisiting the call to question, it says, are the attorneys subject to discipline? We would be looking for an answer choice that says something like, yes, though the advertisement's truthful, it's misleading, or something along those lines. So A says, no, because the attorneys are permitted to make statements that are truthful and not misleading. So while technically A illustrates the correct rule, its reasoning is wrong, right? First of all, we're looking for a yes answer that says no, and this answer choice misses the fact that this advertisement is misleading. B says no because all the statements made are true. B is also wrong because it's only half of the rule. Sure, everything they're saying is true, but it's also misleading, and that's the problem. C says yes because their advertisement's misleading. This looks pretty good. Let's hold on to answer choice C. And then D says yes because advertisements are not permitted under the rules of professional conduct. D is just incorrect. We know that lawyers can advertise under the rules. They just have to follow the requirements for advertising. So C is the correct answer here for question number 3.